Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry for the change of venue. I am currently at a birthday party for my brother-in-law. And tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Eruvin Daf Tzadi Aleph. Before we get started, my heart, my emotions, my feelings, my intellect has been relatively consumed over the last 24 hours or so since Motzei Shabbos, since we learned of the Ketira of Rav David Feinstein and Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. Wherever there is a void in leadership, there is a need for leadership. And these two people have played remarkably critical roles in different areas over the course of the last many decades. Yehi Zichram Baruch, it is a time that we could use the support of those great people. And unfortunately, the Gzeras HaMakom was otherwise the Ratzon that their neshamos should have an aliyah. We're starting on the bottom of Tzadi Amud Beis, relatively clean daf tonight, and we're going to be going all the way to the last line on Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis. So let's get started. Tzadi Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda the Amora. He said, Kishatim Tzolomar, when you take a deeper look at the Shitas, of the Amorai, of the Tanaim in our Mishnah that is back just 2 blot ago, at the opening of the parak. Remember, we're learning parak Gogos. So if you take a look at those shitas, so then you will see the following. You'll see that in regards to Ladivrei Reb Meir, Gagin Rishus La'atman, roofs have their own Rishus. Chatzeros Rishus La'atman, Chatzeros are onto themselves. Karfefios Rishus La'atman, and the Karfefios are treated independently as well. However, Ladivrei Chachamim, and if you look back in the Mishnah just 2 blot ago, just flipping back, you'll see that the Chachamim said that Kol Echad Ve'echad Rishus B'fnei Atzmo. So let's see how this plays out. Top line, Tzadi Aleph Amud Aleph. L'divrei Chachamim, Gagin V'chatzeros Rishus Achas. These 2 places are considered one Rishus, because after all, a person can have a Gag and a Chatzer. So it's Rishus La'atzman, that's one person. So we view that as one entity. Karfefios Rishus Achas. However, when it comes to Karfefios, there we would say that it is a distinct Rishus. And the third shita in our Mishnah, which was the most lenient of all, and in fact the way we paskin, the third shita was that of Reb Shimon, where Reb Shimon was most lenient. The Divrei Reb Shimon, Kulan Rishus Achas, saying, we don't care, you can go interchangeably between the 2, no problem at all. It is considered to be totally appropriate, no problems at all. And here the Gemara ends with this analysis of Rav Yehuda and moves to some proofs, first of Rav and then of Rav Yehuda. The first proof, says the Gemara 4 lines down, Tanya Kavase de Rav. The Gemara first brings a proof to the Shita of Rav. Which Shita of Rav is the Gemara talking about? Now, yesterday on Shabbos, we learned 2 blot. We probably saw Rav's name 15, 20 times. So what Rashi here on the bottom helps us. This Rashi can be found about 10 lines from the bottom of the page, about 5 lines about 6, 7 lines actually into the wider lines. Dibur Hamaskil Tanya Kavase de Rav. And says Rashi, Da'amar Le'el, Begagin Hashavin L'Rabbanon, Deim Nataltal and Bo Ela B'Dalid. And he says we're talking about the Shita of Rav within the Chachamim that only allows for being on your roof within Daled Amos. So then what's the brisa that supports Rav and what's the brisa that supports Rav Yehuda? Tanya Kavase de Rav Yehuda. Says the Gemara as follows, 5th line down. Tanya Kavase de Rav, what's the support of Rav? That Rav holds within the Chachamim that you only have Daled Amos. Says the Gemara, the following brisa. Now remember, we're looking within the sheet of the Chachamim. So first we're going to see the sheet of Rav Meir. So it's of course important to understand it, but the proof for Rav will be found at the end of this Mari Makom. Kol Gagos Ha'ir Rishus Achas Hein. All of the roofs are considered one Rishus. V'asr Lahalos U'Behoreg Min HaGagin L'Chatzer Min HaChatzer L'Gagin. And this is all, as we'll soon see, Rav Meir. He says you're not allowed to bring from the roofs to the Chatzer and from the Chatzer to the roofs. The Kalim Sheshav to the Chatzer, but if you had Kalim that were in the Chatzer from before Shabbos, so then Mutter L'Taltel B'Chatzer, then it's fine to carry that within the Chatzer. And if the Kalim were Begagin, if they were on the roof, then Mutter L'Taltel on Begagin. If it was on the roof, you can carry it on the roof. You just can't interchange the locations. According to Rav Meir, you can't take the items that were in your Chatzer and bring them up to the roof or vice versa. Just within each respective Rishus, you would be allowed to carry, that would be fine. Ubilvad Shelo Yehi Gag Gavoa Yud O Namuch Yud Divrei Rav Meir. Of course, we're familiar with Rav Meir's Shita that when you're going from roof to roof, you have to make sure that the roof that you're going to isn't an elevated or lowered platform of 10 tfachim, because as we spoke about, he holds of the Gzer D'Rabbanan quoted in the name of Rav Yitzchak Bar Abdimi that we learned yesterday at length of Teil Birshus HaRabim. And because we're concerned that even within a Rishus HaYachid, where there's no Isser whatsoever to go from a Rishus HaYachid to an Amud within your Rishus HaYachid, but we were concerned that you would then have that same challenge of transferring that out into a Rishus HaRabim, and therefore we don't allow it. Now, where's the proof to Rav? The next line. The Chachamim Omrim, how do the Chachamim hold? They say, Kol echad be'echad Rishus la'atzmo. That's the same language that we have in our Mishnah 2 blot ago on Pei Tesamid Aleph at the opening of the parak. However, this brisa adds in a little bit more language. Perfect. Now we have a raya for Rav. Rav was of the opinion that we only have Dalet Amos within the world of Shmuel, within the world of the Chachamim, and that's what we see here. We see here very clearly that Rav holds that you only get Dalet Amos, and that's a raya that the Chachamim hold this. Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Yehuda, 1/3 of the way down, Tzadi Aleph Amud Aleph. The brisa supports the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Which Rabbi Yehuda? This is the Rabbi Yehuda we've been learning about, starting at 3 lines from the bottom of Tzadi and Beis, the way we open today. What's the proof for Rabbi Yehuda's shita? It says the Gemara as follows. Amar Rabbi. Rabbi said, Shainu lomdim Torah eitzel Rabbi Shimon b'Tekoa. When we were learning in Tekoa, I've been there personally. I've gone caving there when I was in yeshiva. Tekoa is a beautiful community. So when they were learning Torah with Rabbi Shimon in Tekoa, we would bring our oil, or the equivalent of a shampoo or a soap of some kind, and our towels, migag legag. We'd bring it from roof to roof, umigag lechatzer, and we'd cross over even from a gag to a chatzer, mechatzer lekarpev, and we'd even go from a chatzer to a karpev, ubekarpev acher, and we'd even go to another karpev. We would go everywhere. Until we got to the place where we were going to be washing our bodies. So then says the Gemara in the name of this Tosefta. The Tosefta continues. Rabbi Yehuda, let's not be confused. This is Rabbi Yehuda the Tana. We're trying to bring a riot to Rav Yehuda the Amora. It's always important to catch the difference. That small little yud, Rabbi, most often is used for Tanaim and not for Amoraim. So here, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ma'aseh b'shas sakana. There was a time when the Yidden were not allowed Nebuch. This has happened in our past many times. We have a flavor of it when we were not allowed in our shuls, but this was under Shas Sakana, where we were not allowed to lane from our Torahs. That's actually the root of where we got the minhag of laning Haftarah. But either way, in this case, it's Shas Sakana, B'hainu Malin Sefer Torah Mechatzer Legag Megag Lechatzer Mechatzer Lekarpef Lekrosbo. They took a Sefer Torah, they transferred from a Chatzer to a Gag to a Chatzer to a Karpef. They went all over the place to bring the Sefer Torah, and they said the other Tanaim in the Mishnah said back to Yehuda, no, Amru Lo, you cannot bring a riot from there. Ein Lo. Amru Lo, Ein Shas HaSakana Raya. You can't bring a raya from there. However, from the first part of the Gemara, you certainly can bring a raya, and that was exactly how Rabbi Yehuda understood the Chachamim. That you can go from property to property to property, no problem at all. Very good. That brings us to the 2 dots halfway down Tzadi Aleph Amud Aleph. The rest of this sugya of the day is all going to be one conversation, and the conversation is like this. If you look back just for a moment at the Mishnah on Pei Tesamid Aleph, so the Mishnah on Pei Tesamid Aleph quotes in the name of Reb Shimon that you can go from Rishus to Rishus. What the Mishnah does not say is whether or not that's when there was an Eruv that was made, yes or no. That is a machlokas amoraim that is subject here, and we're going to be analyzing it for the course of the day. So what's the machlokas? It says that the 2 dots of Shimon Omer Echad Gagin v'chulei, and then says the Gemara, Amar Rav halacha ki Reb Shimon. Rav says we paskin like Reb Shimon, and we know in general we paskin like Rav. Rav says that Amar Rav halacha ki Reb Shimon, that we paskin like Rav the Dinyan. Hu shelo irvu. This only applies when there's no Eruv. Aval Irvu, but if in fact there was an Eruv, lo. There, so this is what Rav holds. Rav says that we paskin like Rav Shimon, but only when the person did not make an Eruv. Why not? What would have been the concern, says Rav, had there been an Eruv? The concern was that had there been an Eruv, the concern was that we were afraid that if there was an Eruv, then maybe I would have brought a product from in my house to my chatzer, and then due to the kula of Reb Shimon from my chatzer to the roof, and that's not allowed. You can't go from in your house through your chatzer to the gag. That's not allowed. So Rav says, therefore, by definition, it must be that Reb Shimon was lenient. That Reb Shimon was of the opinion that one was allowed to It must have been a case that Reb Shimon held that Reb Shimon was only when there was no Eruv, but not when there was an Eruv. I see a question in the chat here. Hold on 1 second. Go. A private question here. How were they bathing on Reb Shabbos? So the Gzeira, there was a time when there's a Gzeira derabana not to bathe on Shabbos. And this must have been prior to the Gzeira. We saw an answer like this in the Rishonim somewhere earlier, probably in Maseches Shabbos. So this must have been prior. This must have been prior to the Gzeira. So, anyways, Rav's shita is that it must be that when Rav Shimon was lenient across the boards to carry everywhere, it must be that it's when there was no Eruv. Because if there was an Eruv, then we should be concerned that one will take from in their house to the Chatzar, and then that same item from the Chatzar to the God. However, Ushmuel Amar Bein Irvu Bein Shelo Irvu. No, not correct. No matter what we pass them like Rav Shimon, and no matter what, whether or not the family was Ma'arev, it doesn't make a difference. And then V'chein Amar Rav Yochanan, these words milach soch are removed by both Rashi and Tosfos. And then Amar Rav Yochanan, Bein Irvu, Bein Shelo Irvu, he agrees. So we have a machlokes here between Rav on one side and Shmuel and Rav Yochanan on the other. Again, Rav says that Rav Shimon was only when there's no Eruv, out of concern that we might take something from our house through our chutzner onto the roof. And Shmuel and Rav Yochanan are more wide, they're more open-minded, and they allow for the sheets of Rav Shimon to be whether or not there was an Eruv, no problem. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, and then we will be stopping almost, and then we have one minor sugya after that, then we'll be stopping for that. So here's question number 1. We're 2/3 of the way down on Tzadi Aleph Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Maski Flor Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says, I don't understand something. L'Shmuel ula Rav Yochanan, according to Shmuel and according to Rav Yochanan, Yomru Shnei Kelim B'Chatzer Achas Zeh Muter B'Zeh Aser. According to Shmuel and Rav Yochanan, if you say that it could have been even with an Eruv, then here's the scenario. Let's say that I had an item in my yard from before Shabbos. So that item, according to everyone, you're allowed to take up to your roof. But according to Shmuel and Rav Yochanan, if you're also allowed to bring something out of your house and put it in your Chatzer, then let's say I have 2 items. I have item number 1 and item number 2. Well, these are all muktzah. Let's assume they weren't muktzah. I have 2 different drinks here. I'll do the same thing. Let's say these were not muktzah. This item over here was from before Shabbos sitting in my Chatzer. And this item was in my house on Shabbos. And I brought it out to the Chatzer. So the AirPods, I'm not allowed to bring up to the roof because it came from my house. But the pen I'm allowed to bring up. So the Gemara says you have 2 items sitting next to each other. How can it be, they ask against Shmuel and Rav Yochanan, how can it be that you can have one Chatzer with 2 items in it that have 2 different dinim? That's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. How does the Gemara answer this? Says the Gemara, let me just read the question. In a Maskef Flor of Chizal, Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, according to the 2 of you, how can it be? An item that came from your house, you're not allowed to bring up to the roof. An item that was already in your yard, you are allowed to bring up to the roof. So says the Gemara, what's the problem? Rav Shimon L'Taimeh. This is Rav Shimon L'Shitaso. The Lo Gazar. There's no Gzeira at all. Let's see what this means. It's not in the Mishnah, right? Rav Shimon L'Ma'ad Davar Dama. What is this similar to? The Shalosh Chatzeros Hapsuchos Zulu Zupsuchos or Shus Harabim. You have 3 Chatzeros that are open to each other and are also as well have openings to a Rishus Harabim. The Irvush De Hachitzonos Im Ha'emtzais. The 2 outer ones, you have 3 linear locations. The 2 outer ones were Ma'arev with the middle one. Says the Gemara, he muteres imahen, the middle one is mutter to each of the outer ones. The ubeis achitzonos asurin zaimzeh. The 2 outer ones, those are not allowed to spend time with each other. They can't carry to one another because they were not ma'ariv with one another. And here's the part where Rav Shimon's lashitaso. The lo gazar dilma asi lafuke mani dahai chatzer laha chatzer. So says the Gemara as follows: what happens if chatzer 1 and Chatzar 1 puts an item in Chatzar 2? Now, Chatzar 1 and 3 cannot hang out together. But can Chatzar 1 bring something to Chatzar 2? Yeah. Why would you be allowed to bring something from Chatzar 1 to Chatzar 2? Maybe it would be brought then from Chatzar 2 to Chatzar 3, and that's an Isser Derabanan. So what do we see from here? Says the Gemara, it's very clear that Rabbi Yochanan, the lo gazar, dilma asi, la'afuke, mane, deha Chatzar, la'a Chatzar. Clearly, Rav Shimon was not concerned. Hachanami, here too, by our case, says Rav Shimon, we're not concerned. And the answer is yes, your 2 items. This was in my chutzner from before Shabbos, mutter to bring up to the roof. This I only brought to my chutzner after Shabbos began. And even though that step is mutter, Rav Shimon's not gozer that maybe I'll take this up to the roof. Haraya, from the case of the Gilel Chaseres, Psucha Zulazu, and also Psucha Rishus Harabim, it says the Gemara, that therefore we see that Rav Shimon is the kula here. That's question 1 and answer 1. Question 2. Masiv Rav Sheshes. Wait a minute. Hold on 1 second. We have here a Gemara that we learned just a blot ago, maybe 2 blot ago. It says the Gemara as follows. Rav Shimon Omer, Echad Gagos, Echad Chatzeros, Echad Karfifos. We said that these Rishuyos of a gag, of a chotzer, and a karpef. Those are rishus achas and the kelim sheshavsu b'sochan. That you're allowed for any of the kelim that are already in that rishus, you're allowed to move them interchangeably between these various rishuyos. The lola kelim sheshavsu b'sochan bayis. However, it's not true of the kelim that are already in your house, that are in your house from before Shabbos. So it says the Gemara as follows. If you want to say, like Shmuel and Rav Yochanan, that really the sheet of Rav Shimon is even when there is an Eruv, that's how you could create a scenario where you have items from your house that are in the chatzar. However, if you say that, like Rav, that it was b'shelo irvu only, that Rav Shimon's shita, that you can go interchangeably from a chatzar to a gag to a karpef back and forth, if you say that it's only when there's no eruv, then what is this scenario where you're able to bring something from your house to the yard? You're not allowed to carry if there's no eruv. So what's the scenario where you have an item from your home that's in the chatzar to even trigger the shaila of whether or not you can bring it onto the roof? So says the Gemara, he asks the question and he answers it, Vikumta bisudra. We're talking about a hat, that you're mutter to wear a hat. So you can wear a hat, no problem. You brought it from inside your house. You got dressed before you left. You went out into your yard. You put it down on the table on your in your backyard in your chutzner. That's how you get a scenario, or your sudra, or your scarf. So either of those cases, that would be a scenario where even according to the shita of Rav, even if Rav Shimon was to only be in a case where there was not me'arev, it's still possible to get items from inside your house into the chutzner by wearing them out of the house. And that would be the case. The Rishonim here say, why is it only these items? Maybe it could be other items too. Okay, fine. But that's how the Gemara answers question number one. So we've asked one question and we've asked the second question and answered them both. We are now right at the top of Tzadi Aleph on the base. Let us ask our third question on the Machlokas, Rav versus Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. Again, to review, Machlokas within Rav Shimon. Is Rav Shimon's very lenient shita that you can go from a gag to a gag to a chatzar to a karpeh, from rishus to rishus? Is all of that when the family was not me'arev, or even when they were me'arev? Question 3, Tashma. We've learned this as well. Many blot ago. How far ago is this? It's on Pei Gimel. It just feels like a long time ago. Let's say I live in the chatzar and you live on an elevated porch, and we forgot to be ma'arev with one another. So says the Gemara, Kol shegvor yod tvachim, anything that's above 10 tvachim, we attribute that rishus lemir pesas to the person who's in the higher property, the person who's on the porch. Pachos mikan, if the property is less than 10, so then we can attribute that rishus simply to the person who's in the chatzar. So as says the Gemara, as a qualification, all part of the brisa. When is this true? Shahayu elu shel rabin ve'elu shel rabin. When do we say these rules? If it's a public space that's otherwise a publicly accessible space, that therefore we can say above 10 goes to the mirpesas, below 10 goes to the chatzar. And says the Gemara, ve'irvu elu la'atzman ve'elu la'atzman. And they made an eruv within themselves, the mirpesas within themselves, and the chatzar within themselves. However, says the Gemara, or it was a property of a yachid, and therefore there was no need for an eruv. However, says the Tosefta, if you forget to be me'arev and it's a public place, then it's all one rishus. So the Gemara makes a deal. Taima, the reason why we say it's one rishus, namely Shitas Reb Shimon, the reason why we say it's one rishus is because the lo irvu, because they were not me'arev. However, ha'irvu lo, but if they make an eruv, then it would not be one rishus. That's a beautiful proof that the shita of Shmuel and Rav Yochanan cannot be, because this Tosefta seems perfectly clear that Rav Shimon's shita is only under certain circumstances. It's not everywhere. So Kashya on Shmuel and Rav Yochanan answers the Gemara, no. That Tosefta money, that wasn't the shita of Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan, that's a shita of the Rabbanan. And Dekanami, this is also implied to be the case. We're about 10 lines down, Tzadi Aleph in the base, because the Loktani Karpe fu Mavui Shmamina, because it doesn't say that we're talking about a Karpe fu Mavui. Karpe fu Mavui, the various properties, is the language of Rav Shimon, not the language of the Rabbanan. The language of the Rabbanan is Rishus Achase. So here we see that that's not the case. So therefore, the Gemara gives an answer to number 3. Question 4, Tashma, 1/3 of the way down. You have 5 chatzeros that are open to each other and that are also open to a mavli. So says the Gemara in this brisa, the shachachu kulam below irvu. Everybody forgot to make an eruv. So the din is, Aser lahachnisu lahotzi mechatzer lamavui. You're not allowed to go from the chatzer into the mavui because you forgot to make a shitufe mavuos. Umin hamavui lachatzer. You're not allowed to do that. So that makes perfect sense. That we understand. I should say, sorry, because you didn't make eruv chatzeros. You're not allowed to do that. The kelim sheshavsu b'chatzer. And if you have utensils that were already in your chatzer from before Shabbos, muter l'taltalon b'chatzer. You are allowed to carry them within the chatzer. Says this brisa. Uvimavui aser. And within the mavui, this is our havamina. We're going to come back to these words in about 5 or 6 lines. What does it mean, uvimavui aser? Our havamina is that within the mavui itself, you're not allowed to carry. We'll analyze that shortly. Then Brisa continues, and this is where we get to our question on one of our balei plugta. The Reb Shimon matir. Shahaya Reb Shimon Omer. Reb Shimon was of the opinion, reflecting the opinion that we have in our Mishnah in the beginning of Parakol Gagos, Pei Testament Aleph. What does he hold? Reb Shimon Matir Shahaya Reb Shimon Omer calls man Shein Shel Rabin v'Shachachu v'Lo Yirbu. If the property is public and everyone forgot and didn't make an eruv, then what's the din? Gag v'chotzer v'achsadrum v'pesis v'karpet v'mavui. All of these reshuyos kulan reshus achasim. So the Gemara makes the same view as last time. Taima delo irbu. The only reason why Rav Shimon's shita work is because there's no eruv. Ha'irvu lo, but had there been an eruv, it wouldn't have worked. So that rejects again the opinion of Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. What would they say? How do you get out of this? You have prices that are against you. Says the Gemara, my lo irvu. What does it mean when this brisa says lo irvu? It doesn't mean what you think. My lo irvu, says the Gemara, lo irvu chatzeros bahade adade. They didn't make an eruv chatzeros. Chatzer ubatin irvu. But they did make an eruv within the chatzer and all of the batim. Very good. So then it says the Gemara, wait a minute. Lo irvu tani. You said that lo irvu in that case, but they made it somewhere else. It said they didn't make an eruv. You're saying they made an eruv. The brisa says they didn't make an eruv. So how does that work? So it says Gemara, Milo irvu lo nishtatu. It was that there was no shitufe mavulo, but they did make an eruv chatzeros. A second answer for Shmuel and Rav Yochanan to get out of this complex question that's being asked, not so complex, this question from the Tosefta that has an implication that Rav Shimon cannot be talking about a scenario where there was no eruv. So says the Gemara, Rav Shimon ledivreihem derabanan kamar. Really, Rav Shimon was interplaying his answer with that of the Rabbanan. Lididi, me, according to me, says Rav Shimon, loshna irvu v'loshna lo irvu. This is how Shmuel and Rav Yochanan would answer. Really, at the end of the day, you can have an eruv and you cannot have an eruv. Rav Shimon's shita would be the same, that everything is rishus achas, karpe, chatzer, gag. You can walk interchangeably between. That's really how he feels. But you, the Rabbanan, who say that it's only rishus achas, that you only get that one rishus, oduli mihas, at least agree to me, at least be maskim. At least agree that when there's no eruv, it should be treated like a rishus achas. Come on. That at least makes sense, because your whole concern about something going from the house into the chutzner to the roof doesn't exist because there's no eruv. You can't bring from the house into the chutzner. Says the Gemara, and we still treat them as separate reshuyos. Last sugya for the night, Omar Mar, we learned in the Brisa above the Mavui Aser. It implied in the Gemara that you weren't allowed to carry anything within the Mavui itself. Says the Gemara, Lema Mesai Le Reb Zera Amar Rab. Maybe this follows the sheet of Reb Zera Amar Rab. Amar Reb Zera Amar Rab. Reb Zera Amar Rab says, Mavui Shaloni Shtatku Boy Metalton Gola Badalit Amos. He says that you don't get anything. You're in a Mavui, you forgot to be Ma'arid, you get Dalit Amos. That's all you get. You're done. You didn't make an error. That's your fault. So is that proof that we have a Tosefta that supports this sheet of Rav Zera Amarav? Because it says in the Brisa that umavui aser. Says the Gemara, you misunderstood. Ema ule mavui aser. It's not umavui, ule mavui, and to the mavui. Namely, from the chutzner to the mavui is aser. But says the Gemara, that can't be pshat. That can't be what umavui aser means. Why not? Because Haidu Reisha, we already said that case. We said in the Reisha that you can't go from the chutzner to the mavui. So therefore, what do the words umavui aser mean? Says the Gemara, it still means that you can't go from the chutzner to the mavui, but we needed both. We needed a double reference to this din that you can't go from a chutzner to a mavui. Why? Why did we need that? Says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, Mishnah Yisera Itzrichale. We needed a double Mishnah, an extra Mishnah to prove our point. Mahu de Tema, I might have thought, Kipligi Rabbanan Ale Reb Shimon. Where do the rabbis, where do the Chachamim in the Mishnah and Testament at the beginning of Kol Gagos, where do they argue on Rav Shimon? Maybe we would have thought that that's only where there's an Eruv, but where there's no Eruv, Havamina, maybe the Rabbanan would have agreed to Rav Shimon Kamash Malan that they do not. So all of this, all of these 4 or 5 questions, I think it's 4 questions that we learned tonight, were all a question on the machlokas between Rav on one side and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan on the other. Just to review, and then we'll close out for the night. Our Mishnah spoke about the idea that Rav Shimon said that you can go everywhere, roof to everywhere you want, no problem. Above 10 tvachim, that was the above 10 to below 10 was only a limitation of Rav Meir. So Rav and Shmuel argued, when does Rav Shimon apply? When there was an Eruv or when there was not? So Rav said, sorry, only where there was no Eruv, because if there was an Eruv, then maybe you bring from your house to the chutzah to the roof. He wasn't ready to do that. Shmuel says even where there was an Eruv, because he didn't care. Lo gozar, we saw the case from the Shalosh Chatzeres where he wasn't gozer, and all the various questions there. We'll stop here for tonight. Emir Tashem will pick up tomorrow night with Tzadi Beis, beginning at the very last line of Tzadi Aleph on the Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Thank you for joining. Sorry again for the venue change.